Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a topic that's going to blow your mind. We're going to talk about 8 things we typically think of as feminine, but guess what? They were all originally designed for men. Get ready to have your perceptions completely flipped upside down. Let's start with something you probably never would have guessed. Disposable pads. Yep, you heard that right. While we associate them with menstrual hygiene today, the concept originated with none other than Benjamin Franklin. He was trying to create a device to help stop the bleeding of wounded soldiers. But the first commercially available disposable pads were developed much later by nurses in France during World War I. They realized that the cellulose bandages they were using for soldiers were super absorbent and could be repurposed for their own menstrual needs. So, what started as a battlefield necessity pioneered by men evolved into a staple of modern feminine hygiene. How wild is that? Next up, an iconic fashion statement. High heels. Picture this, it's the 5th-10th century in Persia. Soldiers on horseback are wearing high heels, not to look fabulous, but for a very practical reason. The heel helped them secure their feet in the stirrups, giving them more stability to stand and shoot their bows and arrows while riding. It was all about combat effectiveness. Persian migrants and diplomats then brought this trend to Europe. European aristocrats like King Louis XIV of France adopted them as a symbol of power, wealth, and masculinity. The higher and redder the heel, the more status you had. It wasn't until centuries later that high heels became associated primarily with women's fashion. So next time you see a pair of stilettos, remember they started out on the feet of male warriors. Now, let's talk about something for the mind and body, yoga. Today, if you walk into most yoga studios in the West, you'll likely see a room filled predominantly with women. But yoga's ancient roots in India tell a completely different story. For thousands of years, yoga was a spiritual and physical practice exclusively for men, specifically for young boys and male ascetics. It was a discipline passed down from male gurus to their male students, aimed at achieving spiritual enlightenment. It wasn't until the early 20th century when yoga masters like Krishnamariya started to teach women, and the practice spread to the West, that it began its transformation into the female-dominated wellness activity we know today. Okay, let's get back to fashion with our 4th item. The crop top. Believe it or not, this midriff-bearing style was a men's fashion staple long before it hit women's wardrobes. In the 1980s, crop tops were all the rage in gyms and were heavily associated with bodybuilding culture and the hypermasculine world of American football. Athletes would cut their t-shirts and jerseys short to stay cool and show off their hard-earned ABs. Think of iconic 80s movies and music videos. You will see guys like Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Johnny Depp in A Nightmare on Elm Street, rocking the look. It was a symbol of athleticism and a certain brand of cool, rebellious masculinity. It only crossed over into mainstream women's fashion in the 90s, becoming the pop culture staple we recognize today. Number 5 on our list is another piece of clothing that might surprise you. The G-string. Before it became a staple in lingerie drawers, the earliest versions of the G-string, or loincloth, were worn by men in various ancient cultures across the world, particularly in warmer climates like parts of Africa. It was a practical, minimal piece of clothing for daily wear and activities like hunting. Fast forward to the 1930s in New York City. The mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia, famously ordered that the city's nude dancers had to cover up. To comply with the law while keeping their acts risk, they created the modern G-string. So, what began as a practical garment for men was reinvented for the stage, and eventually made its way into mainstream women's fashion. Let's move on to an essential accessory, the purse. For most of modern history, if you see someone carrying a purse, you assume they're a woman. But historically, bags and purses were completely unisex. In fact, for centuries, men were the primary purse carriers. Since clothing didn't have built-in pockets, everyone needed a small pouch to carry their essentials like coins, keys, and personal items. You can see this in historical paintings and records all the way from ancient times through the Renaissance. These male purses were often attached to a belt. It was only when pockets were sewn into men's trousers in the 17th century that men's need for an external bag decreased. Women's clothing, however, remained pocketless for much longer, so purses became an essential and fashionable female accessory. Our 7th item takes us back to hosiery. Stockings. Today we think of stockings and tights as quintessentially female attire. But for hundreds of years, from the Middle Ages all the way through the 18th century, stockings were a fundamental part of a man's wardrobe. Made of silk, wool, or cotton, these stockings, often brightly colored and sometimes even embroidered, were worn to show off a man's well-shaped legs, which was considered a sign of virility and high social standing. Think of portraits of European kings and noblemen like Henry VIII. They're all proudly displaying their legs in stockings. Trousers as we know them only became the standard for men in the 19th century, at which point stockings became relegated to women's fashion. Finally, number 8 is not an item, but a whole store. Victoria's Secret. This is probably the most shocking one on the list. The global empire of women's lingerie was founded in 1977 by a man named Roy Raymond, and it was created for men. Raymond came up with the idea after feeling incredibly awkward and unwelcome trying to buy lingerie for his wife in a traditional department store. He envisioned a place where men could feel comfortable shopping for lingerie. The stores were designed to look like a Victorian boudoir with dark wood oriental rugs and silk drapery, creating a discreet, masculine-friendly environment. The focus was on selling lingerie as a gift from a man to a woman. It wasn't until the company was sold in 1982 and the marketing strategy was completely overhauled to appeal directly to female consumers that Victoria's Secret became the women-centric brand we know today. So there you have it, 8 things from pads and purses to yoga and Victoria's Secret that have completely flipped their gender association over time. Which of these surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.